What was your childhood church like, Dad? Hi, my name is Ted Rosenblatt, and I'm here with my father, Dr. Rod Rosenblatt, and this is Talks with Dad Rod. You had an interesting experience. You've talked about it. This will be sort of redundant with some things you've done before. What was it like?
Very large, and had the tone of Lutheran pietism. My pastor was a very bright Metropolitan Opera quality tenor singer, and was glad to identify as a pietist. It was a banner he wore proudly. So was his father. Now, how did that manifest itself for me as a kid in Sunday school? Well, the curriculum of the Sunday school was Norwegian Lutheran pietism. It was as close as we ever got in America to what we today call American evangelicalism. That is, the emphasis was on your progress in living the Christian life. Every Sunday school lesson, it all was headed in the direction purposely of personal transformation from sinner to being not sinner. It was a killer. And I'll never forget the day I walked up. I even know what sport coat my dad was wearing. And he said, "How was Sunday school?" And I said, "It was okay." He said, "How would you like to quit?" I said, "Dad, I'd love to quit." He said, "Why don't you never go back? Come and sit next to me in the adult study." Now, my dad, wonderfully, seemed completely immune to pietism. Completely. And I've said to guys afterwards and since, why did he have us in that church? And I think it was because he loved studying with that bright pastor the Bible and being able to ask questions of the pastor during those Bible studies. But it never crossed his mind that I was being in a Sunday school that every single Sunday was really directed to transforming me. And the result was, by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd become an agnostic quietly.
And the improvement thing is really a replacement for Christ and his gospel.
Yeah, transformation replaces Christ objectively dying for my sin.
And it can do that functionally even, now let me ask this, was the gospel preached?
Sort of, but it was...
But it was backed up by that law.
Right. It was in order to get to something else.
And a regular, from your perspective in your history, which is how we get what we get from Dad, the rest of his life. If you understand the core nugget of how this started, that's how you get what we get. That's how we end up having this. The core of the theology that formed 1517 is the focus on the cornerstone.
Right.
But what does that do to get a regular diet of that, in your experience?
A regular diet of Christ crucified for me?
No, the other. So that even if there is Christ crucified, let's say it's backed up by that. I'll be even optimistic.
Well, it drove me to unbelief.
How does that work?
It was impossible to measure up to it. And so you were drawn to unbelief, sort of like iron filings to a magnet. This is too awful to live in. Is there an alternative? And of course, there always is.
So from your perspective, when you were going through that, how did that affect how you perceived God?
As a lawgiver.
A lawyer.
Yeah.
A convictor.
Yeah.
An accuser.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is sort of to flip it upside down. That's actually the other side.
That's right.
The name accuser is actually for the evil one.
Yep.
That's his name.
Yep. Yep.
But it gives a feeling of it. It's funny how that works. It looks like it's all a good idea to pursue. And I've discussed this with people before about the idea that taking sanctification onto yourself is an error.
Oh.
That we sanctify ourselves rather than even in the Old Testament where God says, I, the Lord thy God, sanctify you.
Right.
No matter how many times we hear that, we can't accept that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. And so, in God's good timing, I began to head back when I got to the University of Washington. I was a science major. And one of the moves was I had an atheistic bio prof pushing evolution with everything he had. And that was one of the things that drew me back toward what we call theism, or belief that there was a God who created, and it was far away from his intent. But as I kept seeing more and more drawings of Eohippus and other things that we doubt existed in between forms, I started to think, this really is bankrupt.
What is bankrupt?
Secular, a secular view of things. It just, one part of it is a total evolutionary view. That's just one piece of it. But I thought to myself as he was lecturing, this is based on artists' reconstruction of what they think might have been, not hard science.
And I think we're going to do another episode where we go into that in more depth. I don't want to cover that too much here, but I really want to focus on the origin here of how you got to the point of feeling freed when you had functionally distanced yourself from the church.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you had become, I never got from you that you had become an active unbeliever in Jesus. It was just that you didn't want to go to church or have anything to do with it.
Right.
You were just relieved and on vacation.
Correct.
Which I went through my own version of. There was in the middle of my church hiatus years, which I don't know how you were so graceful with me. I sort of would understand. I think because you're your father's son and you had a similar experience, it sort of made sense to you, where you would be going to church and I'd say, you going to church? And you'd say, yep. And I'd say, have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no way I was going back to that because it was just too much. And that was with faithful pastors. Somewhere in there, I knew I was going to get the right thing, but church was hard. And I remember having a conversation with my mom's mom years prior where she wanted to know where I went to church. And I went, oh, I don't go to church. Why? Because, and I said, I believe in Jesus, but I don't go to church. Man, she was horrified. It was like I'd thrown ice water on her face. She just was, mm-hmm. That old guard could not comprehend such a thing. But the thing I was going through, I really didn't feel any antipathy to Christ. There was actually no right. problem there.
Right.
But being in the church was such a negative experience that at that time, I just wasn't going there.
A lot of people today, young people who would call themselves nuns, N-O-N-E-S, if you had a checklist, are that. It isn't that they are complacent about who Jesus was and is.
And if asked, they would say, well, I believe he died for my sins.
Yes. But does that connect with attending church? Heavens no.
Yeah, you go to church to have your faith reduced.
Yeah.
So far in protecting it.
Or to be morally instructed in case you need it.
Which is withering. And you had once said in that, you've said it in a number of places. God is not your mother. And it comes across that way. And a harsh one at that.
Yep.
This is not to belittle moms,
Yep.
all you great moms out there whom we love. This is not about that. This is about that hard form. And you can get it in both mom and dad. Very law-oriented,
yeah.
finger wagging, judgmental,
yeah.
harsh on every jot and tittle,
Yep.
making sure that every single thing is in alignment. It's everything is clean, and you never want to go there ever again. It's like a museum that has no solid, warm light in it. It is empty of good spirit, and you don't want to be there.
Yep.
And it's not all churches, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that I couldn't. For a time, I did not want to attend even the good churches because it had been so hard. And I don't know what the click over was. I attribute it to the Holy Spirit that I remember saying to you this one time, I was like, well, maybe I'll go with you this time. You hadn't done anything. You had never pressured me. You didn't exhibit any fear. There was no guilt from you, no judgment, nothing. You just went about your life, typing on your Mac, writing up your things for school, grading papers, teaching students. And then you'd go to church, and you never did anything with me that was like, Ted, nothing. You didn't ask me. You didn't pressure me. And then one day I was like, maybe I'll go with you. And it was Pastor Hodel who was with us, he's been called home. He's in glory now, sadly. One of our favorite people. We're always crushed by that here. But he was formative. He was with us at 1517 from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. He was the one that carried me back in. It was like God assigned him to carry me back in to the church. But at no time when I was frustrated with the church did I feel like I don't believe in Jesus now. I never felt that way.
Right. There are thousands of them today.
And it was great to be able to come and receive the gifts, confess the confessions, and go through the church year and have this family. And it was the basics. And if you could, it was nice to implicitly be shown that I could just go to get the basics, and that was enough. That was the other part, was that the pastor wasn't looking for more from me. I didn't need to be on a board. I didn't need to take on a church task or put myself out in some way. Nothing was expected of me. They were just very happy to see me when I showed up. That was it. They weren't even taking a roll like you talked about. They weren't checking a little box and seeing if my church attendance was woeful.
Right.
It seems like the best pastors don't do that, in spite of you not being there sometimes. They don't. They're just so happy when you get to the party.
Interesting, huh?
Man, is that welcoming.
Yeah.
It makes you want to be there more in spite of yourself.
Yeah.
And your history. And the pastor's like, just got gospel for you. So good to see you.
Yep.
And puts the Lord's, body and blood into your mouth.
And with the words of forgiveness for you.
Yep.
This was for you. Take and eat.
Take and eat the body of the Lord given for you. Take and drink. Mm-hmm. This is the blood of Jesus Christ, shed for you for the forgiveness of your sins.
Yep.
And he gets to go home. And that was the entire, and then I learned under Pastor Hodel, that was the entire necessity, if there is a necessity, of my involvement.
Yeah.
I could just go and receive and leave.
That's great. It's the way it should be.
And being absolved on the way in and being absolved on the way out.
Yeah.
Go in peace. You've been served by the Lord.
Yeah. Doesn't get better than that.
More on the next episode. We'll tap into this. I had to stop Dad because sometimes Dad will go into the next episode before we can cover it. And then I'm like, oh, great. Now that's that episode. So this is enjoyable and makes sense and connects for a lot of you. Come to 1517.org for more. And we will see you on social media. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on Talks with Dad Rod, part of the 1517 Podcast Network. This podcast and all 1517's content is made possible through financial support by listeners just like you. Please visit 1517.org for more, and please consider clicking on the donate button and making a recurring or one-time contribution to help us share this good news in a world which so desperately needs it.